Norman Bradbury from Rail Future. I'd like, if I may, just to quickly go back to fares. We have been trying to establish the net costs of the rail industry. There are large sums of money that go back to the government from the rail industry, from various taxes. There's profit-sharing agreements, revenue-sharing agreements, premium payments, and loan repayments with interest. Now, there are a number of information, amount of information that we haven't been able to achieve. We're still waiting to get some results, if we ever do. But we do know that at least $2 billion a year goes back from many of those streams. We now have, in addition, something called industrial buildings tax. That cost Network Rail last year £512 million alone. Now, it seems that the fares structure is based on the perceived costs of the rail industry without taking account these large sums that are going back. And I think the government needs to take a good look at the net costs so that we can establish a fairer fares policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Norman. Yeah, this is the question about to the extent to which the cost of the railway is offset by payments back to the Treasury in one form or another, whether it's cumulo rates or taxes of various sorts. That's the question, isn't it? Now, does anyone have a view on that? I'll throw it open.
Can I just say, it's a very interesting question. If you get the answers, I'd like to see them. And the Treasury is a law to itself. And I'm sure that I'd be happy to, and I expect Stephen would be as well, to put down parliamentary questions if that's helpful, because that's a very important aspect to nail down.
We have a meeting coming up with you next month, so perhaps we will talk.
Okay. But, I'll just go through. I think Peter, would you like to?
Perhaps I could answer the question in two ways very quickly. Firstly, it's one of the I think the challenges of the rail industry that train operators work on gross cost, net revenue. They take no consideration and not rewarded. Their shareholders are not rewarded for the socio-economic value of their innovation, or attracting more passengers onto rail when there's greater savings are made on the road network. The Department of Transport, of course, and Transport for London work on a basis of transport appraisal which uses a model called NATA, and that really means that the actual values of railways go beyond the revenues or the net cost, but goes into factors such as carbon, reducing road congestion, avoiding building more lanes on the motorway, and indeed this one for London called agglomeration, which is one of the largest factors which actually created the value necessary to build Crossrail, because if you can get lots of people efficiently into London, London maintains its position as an economic powerhouse of the country, and therefore net worth is created. So it's very difficult to get a balance sheet on the value of rail.
Thank you. Stephen?
Well, I'd certainly agree with Peter's last point that it is quite difficult, and some of the net costs that move around. I mean, people often talk about how much the government's putting in, and then there's costs against that and revenues coming in from other streams. And of course there is the premium payment coming back at the moment as well, which is a big element. And so I think getting a proper cost structure and understanding a proper cost structure is really important. My only concern, I'm sure that DFT do a number of good works in this area. My only concern about NATA is the same as with all models, which is that if you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out. And many of you will remember the famous remark that Tom Harris was forced to make last year, that on the NATA model, if you took if you took a person out of a car and put it onto light rail, it counted as a light, on the DFT analysis, it counted as a light rail negative, because it took people off the car, which then gave the Treasury less money. So you've got to be pretty careful about what assumptions are going into NATA as well. And there are a number of, the DFT I know at the moment are doing a number of revisions to those assumptions, and I think any incoming government will want to be pretty clear about how that model sets out so that we can really analyse the movement in cost.
Anthony?
Personally, I can't believe that any government's ever going to make a profit out of the rail industry, and the closest I've ever seen to approximation of the costs and the income was buried on the ORRs, the rail regulators' side. There's a very interesting analysis about some of the franchises trying to allocate some of the infrastructure costs to them, and even South West Trains comes out as costing the government quite a lot because of what they have to provide to Network Rail. What I do know is that passengers are putting in about £6 billion a year into the rail industry, which is an awful lot of money, which they ought to get a bit of better value for money for out of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Christian.
Yes, I mean, this goes to the very fundamental question about what the purpose of the railway is, and Peter answered pretty much what I was going to say. Externalities is the economic term for this, and what is extraordinary is that we really haven't sorted out this in the country, particularly post-privatisation, because the train operating companies often say, oh, we can't do this because there isn't a business case for it. The Lewis Uckfield, which I'm sure Norman is...
I told you not to mention that.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm sure Norman will be pleased that I mentioned. I mean, it's somewhere which has been turned down. The reopening has been turned down because there isn't a business case. Now, I studied economics at Warwick University many years ago, but I know that I could create a business case that was positive quite easily by just making certain assumptions and not. At the end of the day, and I've written books about. I haven't plugged my books yet. So I've written books about the Victorian railways and the Victorian Underground and what they did. And I really think that you have to reclaim the spirit. And maybe the Tories will, but I somewhat doubt it. But maybe they will. which is that, you know, if you know something is right, just go ahead and do it. I mean, I had a big argument with Richard Bowker once when he was Strategic Rail Authority, head of Strategic Rail Authority, and about bicycle parking. He said, well, we have to do a business case before we put any bicycle parking in. And that's what's killing the whole thing. Just go ahead and do it sometimes.
Some support. Kat.
Yeah, I think in a way it's a very interesting question. I'd be interested to know the answer, to know the figures. But in a way, our bigger problem as campaigners, anyway, is that the public perception is that it's all about the train companies putting up fares, and that's the biggest challenge for us. You know, at the end of the day, it's government policy that is making passengers pay more and more. If the current system costs too much, it's government policy that's not making structural changes to reduce those costs. But when you talk to anybody, you know, your friends or anybody at stations about fares, they all assume that it's the TOCs, and it's not. So I think that's the kind of the issue that we have to be dealing with.
Thank you very much. Okay, next